So how do you get rid of debt? You default on it. That's probably not going to happen. You pay it down. That isn't happening. And you inflate it away. Inflate it away. That's where the bond market, in my opinion's mind is right now. The government's going to keep printing and paying back with lower value dollars. It's happened in the past with other countries. It's been a roadmap with other countries. I think that's what's happening in the United States, and it's a little bit scary.
Is the feud between Donald Trump and Elon Musk distracting us from far more serious forces at play? A shift away from American economic dominance? Well, my name's Tom Harwood. This is GB News Money. Do remember to click that subscribe button to stay up to date with everything we discuss here on this channel. But I'm delighted to say that joining me now is Kevin DeMeritt, an international business and economic expert who's here to explain why the collapse of the dollar may already be underway, what central banks around the world are doing in response, and how it could affect you, whether you live in the United Kingdom or the United States. Thanks so much for being here with us, Kevin. First of all, what exactly is going on in terms of de-dollarisation? It's a big word. It's something that's been discussed, well, for quite some time now. What's your stance on it?
Well, you have you have a few things going on here. You have the BRICS, so Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa, trying to take over the US dollar, and they're doing a pretty good job. And I really look for tipping points when you look in the financial markets. And for years and years, people have been trying to, or countries have been trying to take over the US dollar's dominance. But this one really has my attention because the tipping point here is that 40% of the population represents those 5 countries. And you start adding in the other 10, 15 other countries that are fairly substantial on top of that, and you almost have 50% of the population looking at a new BRICS currency, and they have about 35% of the GDP around the world. So from a financial standpoint, doesn't look good, and it doesn't look good from the standpoint that most of the reserve currencies around the world have lasted about 100, 110 years, and we're kind of at the end of that 110, 115 year period with the US dollar. So you have that going on. You have a lot of countries selling off US treasuries. You have China, Russia. Just recently you had Japan, which really hasn't been a seller of US treasuries. But it makes a lot of sense because the US dollar since 2020 is down by about 20% with the inflation rate. And so who wants to hold the dollar that's down 20%? So you have a lot of things kind of coming together all at once. And then the US dollar is kind of the government, US government has kind of weaponized the US dollar against a lot of countries, Russia, so on and so forth. And I think some of the blowback from that is countries are looking for different currencies that they can trust and rely upon.
I suppose this is kind of a poetic conversation to be having. You're talking about the last 100 years or so of dollar dominance. Of course, I'm sitting in London, which used to be the financial centre of the world, but it did take 2 world wars to shift the economic centre of gravity from London to Washington, DC. It did take the almost bankrupting of Britain in fighting those wars, a massive amount of debt taken on, frankly, Americans loaning the British government money to fight those wars. We're surely not close to anything of that scale with the United States. I mean, the collapse of Britain as that sort of reserve currency for the world was all more serious a situation than what America faces today.
Well, that's true, but there's been 7 world reserve currencies in the history of the world, and each one of them had their own challenge, from inflation to war to huge amounts of debt, and debt being the big one, by the way, for most of the countries, Rome and so on and so forth. All of those countries kind of fell apart because of debt. Well, look what the government has done since 2008 here in the United States. We've gone from $8 billion to $8 trillion to $34 trillion in a very short time period. And just recently, Moody's downgraded our debt based on the big, beautiful budget, plan that Trump has. So look, if you're talking about debt, we're going in the wrong direction from that standpoint. And the dollar definitely is going in the wrong direction. So I think, it's not going to be a war, potentially. It's going to be something else, higher inflation, a huge recession, another coronavirus, something's going to happen, and debt is not under control at all. We just have a debt problem we cannot get under control, and it keeps getting worse. It's $1 trillion one year, it's $2 trillion the next year. It just keeps growing and growing, and I think that's going to be the biggest problem that we have.
Do you think that's why Elon Musk resigned his role at Doge, stepped back as his position in the White House as this special government employee? Do you think it's the issue of debt and the perhaps more blasé attitude that the president has towards debt than someone like Elon Musk did? Do you think that's the main reason behind the sort of destructive blowout of that relationship?
I think it's the only reason. I really do. I mean, if you listen to the first thing that he said was, this is just completely crazy. I came in, we were going to reduce spending by trillions of dollars. Some of it happened, some of it didn't. And then now we have this budget that looks completely different than what they probably agreed upon when they sat down and tried to take this partnership on. So look, you don't have just Elon Musk. You have Warren Buffett and a lot of other people that really understand the economy, saying that debt is really going to kill the U.S. government, that will kill the U.S. dollar. And I think people here in the United States want a strong dollar. We want a strong economy, and debt doesn't get you there. Hey, if I could go out and make myself a better life for the rest of my life by overspending on credit cards, I'd be happy to do it. But we all know that doesn't happen. You're happy for about 3 or 4 years, and after that, you're pretty depressed because you don't have any money left.
What do you say to those people who say that the idea that there is, a second world reserve currency just waiting to leapfrog the dollar seems a bit fanciful, given the sheer scale of world reserves that are held in the dollar? No one else comes close, even within the sort of BRICS group that you talk about. These are countries that, to some extent, hate each other. India's never going to accept a Chinese reserve currency, and China's never going to accept an Indian reserve currency. The euro's going nowhere. I mean, what would be the currency that actually usurps and replaces the dollar? I mean, in terms of percentage terms, nothing comes close.
Well, look, no one thought that, the British currency, I don't think anybody thought the U.S. In the First World War was probably going to be the next world reserve currency. So I really can't tell you, but I think BRICS is actually doing a pretty good job for a bunch of countries who don't like each other. They've done an enormous job of getting together and having the GDP, the population, gathering other countries to support this, and having some sort of plan that we're going to back this currency potentially by commodities or gold, where we just can't print willy-nilly, because I think that's what countries out there really are looking for, is some currency that isn't going to be printed just because somebody wants to, turn on the printing press and we've got some problems in the economy, let's go print. If you're going to print and you back it by some gold or some other commodities, you have to have those commodities to back every dollar that you're printing. Even if it's a small portion, it controls the printing of that dollar, controls the value of that dollar. So if I had to guess, the next world reserve currency is going to be backed by either some small portion of gold or a basket of other currencies or commodities that prohibit the printing of the dollar or that currency by these nations without some sort of a stopgap.
Shall we just discuss what really happened since the 1970s, since the breakdown of the previous system, the pegging of the dollar to something that was material and the move to, fiat currency? I mean, what has actually occurred in the last 50 or 60 years?
Well, the dollar's completely lost an enormous amount of value, because when you print a dollar, if you have to back it, if you have to purchase some gold to back it, you're prohibited from purchasing if you don't have the dollar, some portion of that dollar, to buy some gold or some other commodity. When you go off of that system, then the government can print money as much as they want until that faith in that dollar erodes. And that's what's happening on a worldwide basis right now. We've never seen the petrodollar have major oil producers starting to accept euros and yuan and other currencies for oil, and you're seeing it all over the place. So that's broken down. You have debt that's out of control. You have the BRICS currency that's starting to kind of dig in. So you have a lot of these things that are happening because we went off that gold standard and printed too many dollars and used it. We weaponized it. I think a lot of people are looking for something that's more like what we had back in 1974 before we came off the gold standard.
I mean, this is a serious moment, of course, because the US government is trying to cut a huge amount of taxes and at the same time spend a lot more money, raise that debt ceiling, expand the scope of government. To some extent, some commentators have said this is a similar sort of experiment that the United Kingdom saw in October 2022, when Liz Truss was Prime Minister for just 49 days. She put forward a budget, a mini budget, as it was called, that massively expanded the amount that the state was spending, fixing energy prices for people in the middle of an energy crisis, the government paying half of everyone's energy bills, but at the same time cutting a bunch of taxes. Now, of course, this led to international markets losing a lot of confidence in Britain and a government meltdown, a market meltdown, the Bank of England stepping in and the Prime Minister being defenestrated. But a lot of the commentators at the time said, well, of course Britain can't do this. It doesn't have the world reserve currency. The markets are going to pummel it into oblivion. But this trick could work in America because America does have the world reserve currency. It's not all too different to what happened in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan cut taxes, massively increased spending, particularly on the military, and in the end hoped that growth would sort of sort it all out, which some argue it sort of did.
Yeah, I think it's a little different because the debt levels are completely different than when Reagan was in office. Debt is literally out of control. Deficits are out of control. And the bond investors are usually, in my opinion, the smartest guys out there, right? They look at the world a little bit differently than everybody else does and look at where interest rates are. They just don't want to come down. You know, the Federal Reserve doesn't want lower interest rates because they believe it will spark a little bit more inflation, and I believe it will too. The bond investors and the big institutions backing those bonds are not budging on interest rates right now, and Moody's downgrades, the U.S. government's rating on the treasuries, and nobody blinks an eye. Now, this has happened before, so people kind of shove it under the rug. I think this time is different. The deficit matters, and when it matters most, and the problem gets too big, how are you going to fix it? We have $1 trillion of interest payments that's larger than the national defense budget. It matters, and it's going to matter more. And I think that's why Elon Musk is saying, hey, look, I've had enough. This is crazy. We've got to fix it, or the United States we're going to look a lot different 10 years from now than the way we do today.
And yet this was the political impossibility that Elon Musk sort of found himself facing. You have around £8 trillion of a federal budget, and you've got £1 trillion of that is dead interest. Of course, you can't cut that. But then you've got veterans affairs, you've got Medicare, you've got Medicaid, you've got all of these areas that the politicians do not want to touch. You've got military spending that politicians, of course, want to expand in an ever more dangerous world. And the amount that could actually be cut, I mean, it just about ended up being USAID, which of course, I mean, a lot of people would say it was spending frivolously or whatever, but it's never going to be. I mean, the amount that is left to cut is less than the total amount of cuts that Elon Musk was promising in the first place.
Yeah, it's a bad situation. We need to fix it. There's going to be pain that needs to be had here in the United States. Look, if I'm overspending on my credit card bill, I can't go out to eat as much. I can't go on vacation as much. I can't buy those fancy, a fancy new car or clothes. There's pain involved, and the politicians don't want to go through that pain. They think they're not going to get reelected or what have you. But I think the American people are behind what Elon Musk wants to do. Maybe not exactly, his style of doing it, but we want a strong economy. We want a strong dollar. We want the deficit to come down. And it's going exactly the opposite. So I think you could wake up in 2 to 3 years if they don't fix this, and the faith in the US dollar is going to continue to erode around the world. If that continues to happen, who's going to buy the debt? How high is interest going to go? And then how high is the interest on that debt going to be? Is it going to be $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion? Doesn't interest rates don't have to go up that much to actually have an interest payment of $1.5 trillion. So how do you get rid of debt? You default on it. That's probably not going to happen. You pay it down. That isn't happening. And you inflate it away. Inflate it away. That's where the bond market, in my opinion's mind is right now. The government's going to keep printing and paying back with lower value dollars. It's happened in the past with other countries. It's been a roadmap with other countries. I think that's what's happening in the United States, and it's a little bit scary.
And that is an incredibly stark warning there. I mean, we know how painful, how potent inflation can be. I mean, it's probably one of the main reasons why Donald Trump was able to get back in as president. People really feel, despite the impressive GDP growth of the United States, people felt poorer because of this inflation. And people's attitudes to going out and spending were just shot to the floor because of that inflation. I mean, it's a really potent political thing when a country experiences significant inflation. Are you suggesting that this could happen in a short order of time?
Well, short orders, short by whose measure, right? I'm saying in the next 3 to 5 years, if we don't put a better plan together, I think you're going to see other countries selling off more of the treasuries as the dollar continues to collapse or fall. And in the United States, if we can't get our spending under control and our trade deficit under control, the market or the world is going to look a lot different from a world reserve status from the United States. And what scares me most is these CBDCs. Because if the U.S. government moves to CBDCs, those can be manipulated much faster than the currency that we currently have out in the world now. So if you want to inflate something away or revalue currencies, it's a heck of a lot easier to do that with the CBDCs than it is with the currency and the current monetary system that we have today.
Looking around the world where actually someone has been able to politically turn the tide, it's incredibly rare, but I think perhaps the only time it's happened in this century has been in Argentina over the course of the last 2 years, where Javier Milei was able to get himself elected to the presidency of that country, slash spending, slash budgets, deliver the first budget surplus that country has seen in I don't know how long. Put that country that, of course, had declined so precipitously, had been in the top league of rich nations, completely collapsed over the course of the best part of a century, starting to get back on track. But my goodness me, Kevin, that took 7 or 8 defaults on Argentina's national debt before the country was ready to sort of take that harsh medicine. I mean, the first default, they just kept voting for the same policies again and again and again, and they defaulted again and again and again. People got poorer. People fled the country. You had not an immigration crisis, but an emigration crisis. I mean, is it really going to take 7 or 8 national debt defaults for a democratic society to sort of accept the chainsaw is necessary?
It's always a crisis that gets people to change. I don't know if it's the first crisis or the second crisis or the third crisis. I can't tell you which one it is, but there is going to be a crisis because that's the only thing that really gets people to change. Because the other option to that is some politician that needs to inspire the entire United States to say, we are going to go through some tough times. The spending is going to be slashed. Our roads might not be fixed as quickly or as promptly as you want them to be fixed because we just don't have the money to continue to spend and spend and spend. So either you have a politician that's going to put his career on the line, and if somebody was ever going to do that, and I believe this is what people believed in Trump, is that you've got 4 years. You're not going to get reelected. You can do just about anything you want if you can kind of get the House and the Senate to everybody get together and get behind this, spending cut. And I think that's where Elon Musk's mind was. Then we can do something before a crisis. But at this particular point, I look at things and say, okay, it's going to take a crisis or two before we wake up and say, we've got to get our, you know what I'm saying, together. Otherwise, we're going to have a major problem with the dollar and with our economy for a longer period of time than people want to to have that kind of pain.
What do you make of Elon Musk's sort of newfound techno-optimist case? And I don't know how much of a coping mechanism this is, but Elon Musk's taken to Twitter on a number of occasions after he left the White House to start saying, you know, maybe it won't matter so much if we can't cut several $1 trillion from the budget because AI and robots are going to come in and the US economy is going to grow by 10 or 15% per annum, and that's going to beat out any sort of inflationary fears. I mean, if we're on the edge of some sort of artificial intelligence explosion and reaching artificial general intelligence, I mean, could that actually be the deus ex machina, the saving grace for the American economy that sort of magics away all the other problems?
Well, maybe for the economy, I'm not sure for workers. So if you're going to do that, we're replacing workers. And then what do we do with the wages of the people who don't have any more jobs, right? So the government's going to have to spend money to, support some of those people while we make it through this whole AI shift. So no, I don't think that's going to work. I think AI is going to be extremely efficient. I think it will take over a lot of jobs. It makes me a little bit nervous for my own children. What are they going to do? Because, hey, it's farming. Well, I just looked at a tractor and a combine running by themselves next to each other, and nobody was in either one of them. And I said, okay, well, farming's out. So it's really tough to try to sit down and figure out what are people going to do as AI takes over. Yet you have all of these people. They all can't be on the food line, and the government's got to support this change from the way the economy is running today to where we'll be in the future. And if it's manufacturing, I don't believe that either. I've seen robots doing an incredible job of picking strawberries to building cars. So I think the shift, no one understands what AI and that shift is going to look like. And look, Elon Musk is a very smart guy. Yes, AI could be deflationary, and you don't need, the wages and the people behind most of the expense of building whatever it is in the world. Mostly, employment is the biggest cost of manufacturing things. But the AI then shifts people out of work, and they're talking about this minimum wage or these minimum amount of money that they need to pay people. Well, $2,500, $3,000 a month isn't going to cut it, and the deficit's going to have to go up to cover all of that. So I'm a little nervous about AI and where all that's going. I think it's great technology. It's just how does the economy react to it, and especially in the United States.
Yeah, and yet what you have is a huge cry for onshoring jobs. I mean, one of the biggest sort of arguments from Donald Trump has been that all of these jobs have gone overseas, particularly to countries like China, and America needs to get those jobs back, particularly through high tariffs. But I suppose there are two questions to you on that. Number one, aren't these tariffs incredibly inflationary? And number two, I suppose one of the big questions about, well, have these jobs actually gone to China, or has the work gone to China, but China's just automated so much of it? I mean, they've got about 25% youth unemployment in China. I mean, this is stuff that no one's really talking about.
Yeah, the jobs are going to come back to the United States, and I think what President Trump, in my opinion, may not be thinking about is the fact that automation is going to take over. So those jobs may come back to the United States, and they may be fairly inexpensive if we have the best robots in the world and the best AI in the world, and we can build factories that build things without people. We've cut enormous amounts of expense. And yes, everything came back to the United States, and maybe the world wants things manufactured in the United States because cheap labor's a robot. Maybe that's all going to happen, but it's not going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to take a little bit longer than that. There's an enormous amount of infrastructure that needs to happen with data centers to drive all of that, and then different factories and robots to make all that manufacturing happen. So I think that's 8 to 10 years out in a short term. So as far as tariffs are concerned, are they inflationary? Absolutely. Are they necessary? Hey, some countries that we do business with have placed tariffs on the United States, and we have done nothing about it. So is it the right thing to do? Yes. I think if you match tariffs, that's the right thing to do. if your tariffs are higher than the other people that want to place tariffs on you, I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. But you will see some inflation. We're already starting to see some of it. You also see, the tax side of it, where there was a budget surplus. Now that budget surplus was also in April when we're bringing in taxes from everybody, paying taxes in the United States. But still, we haven't seen a surplus in a fairly long time. So that was some positive news. So we'll see how
Right,
that
but
works
we
out over
started
the
this
next 3-4
conversation
months.
talking about, the bond yields spiking for the United States and well, frankly, for just about every country around the world. I mean, surely that is an effect that you can see from so-called Liberation Day. That is when you see a lot of nervousness from international creditors, and suddenly the cost of American debt has spiked up. In fact, by some estimates, it's wiped out every single saving that Elon Musk's Doge actually made. Just the cost of the interest on American debt.
Yeah, it has. And I think the big challenge with these tariffs is they're on, they're off, they're huge, they're 10%, they're 50%. They're so all over the place that nobody knows what to do. So everybody says, look, I'm going to take some of the worst case scenarios and we're just going to invest based on that. We want to purchase some precious metals because we don't know what's going on. We want higher interest on bonds because that's the best place to be for some safety and some diversification. But we're not taking lower interest rates when this guy's going, high-low with these tariffs. And that uncertainty, no one likes. Not one market around the world likes uncertainty, especially around these tariffs. And that's a big problem for him. He needs to put a plan together where he says, look, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to stick with. If a country wants to come back and have some negotiations, it's going to be reasonable negotiations. Let's have some reasonable tariffs. And if they want to lower, we'll lower along with them. That's reasonable. What we're doing right now is unreasonable, and the markets are reacting to it, especially the bond market.
It's so interesting talking about this with the historical perspective. You're talking about every 100 or so years, the world reserve currency sort of shifting from one power centre to another. Because at the turn of the last century, in the United Kingdom, we sort of saw a populist movement that was a bit nervous about, even though Britain was undisputably top country in the world, the largest empire the world had ever known, the world reserve currency, everything seemed to be going fine. The First World War even was unimaginable for people. And at that stage, there was this strange nervousness in the political class in Britain. You had a politician called Joseph Chamberlain who became incredibly popular off the back of his tariff plan. He wanted something called imperial preference, which would raise tariffs against every non-empire country. And you had this sort of strange battle over free trade in that early part of the 20th century in the United Kingdom, all off the back of a nervousness about whether or not the sort of imperial century of Britain being the sole superpower of the world, whether or not that was going to disappear, even though no one could really put their finger on why it might disappear. I'm just seeing so many strange parallels between that time in the early 20th century to this time in the relatively early 21st century, where we have had an American, around 100 years or so of American financial dominance. And you get this similar sort of nervousness at the top of American politics. Even though there's no clear challenger, we can't quite see what's going to happen next. We do sort of get this sense of, almost paranoia.
Yeah, well, look, you have tariffs, you add in debt, you add in the uncertainty, you add in the bullying that, quite frankly, both countries had when you have the world's reserve currency, especially near the end. But if you look at world currencies, all 7 of them had huge amounts of debt in the end. They started off, and for the first 50, 60 years, they were pretty good. And then after that, the debt started increasing, and it looked like a hockey stick. It just kept going higher and higher, faster and faster, and no politician wanted to step in and say, okay, enough is enough. Or the people that were electing those people didn't put them under enough pressure because, their jobs and their security were going to be harmed. That's where you're talking about these crises starting to happen. So you feel like something's not exactly right now. Why are interest rates, as high as they are? Why are people selling the dollar? Why are people moving away from the dollar and the petrodollar and purchasing oil in different currencies? Why is this BRICS currency getting so much attention? So you start adding all of those things up, and you don't need much of a black swan event for a lot of countries to say, hey, look, we've had enough. We need some currency that isn't going to be debased through debt, because through 400 or 500 years of looking backwards, we should have all figured out that debt is one of the biggest things that's going to destroy a country and destroy their currency. That's it. It's usually not war. It's the debt that you had to accumulate because of the war, just like Britain. It's always about debt. It's been about debt when the real estate crisis happened in the United States in 2008 and 2001 with the dot-com, with everybody putting a business plan on the back of a napkin and somebody giving them money. That was all about debt. It all collapsed. Markets collapsed. Countries collapsed because of debt. And that's the problem we have right now. Again, that's why I think Elon Musk was all fired up to get in there in the first place, and then found out this is a tough group of people to shift from spending money to saving money, or cutting or slashing the spending. It's a tough thing to do in Washington. And I think if we can't fix it, like I've said before, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to look like a different country.
Yeah, it's hard to see how a country can maintain a sort of status of superiority over the world if it's the rest of the world that's holding that country by the proverbial being the creditor of that country. But I've got to ask you, Kevin, then, I mean, if we've seen this pattern time and time and time again through history, I mean, is it possible to buck the trend?
Well, as a country, or is that you're talking about individuals?
As the United States in 2025, I mean, is the writing already on the wall, or is the United States going to be the first empire, country, superpower, whatever, that will buck this sort of pattern of just passing on the baton of world reserve currency status?
If I had to guess, what has to happen is exactly what you said with crises. If we had a crisis that I guess was worse than 2008, and people came together and said, look, we've got to change this. We need to elect somebody that's platform says we are going to strengthen our dollar, strengthen the economy, and we're going to do that by cutting spending and making sure that we can get our interest payments and so on and so forth under control, we've got a shot. Has that happened in history with any other country? Not that I can think of. It took crisis after crisis, like you said, with Argentina before that happened. And you don't have to look around too far from the United States. It's happened in Mexico. It happened in Argentina. It's happened in Brazil. It's happened in Greece. It took major crises for people's spending patterns to change, and then the government to change those patterns as well.
Gosh, well, it's a bleak note there, Kevin. Can we end on some sort of positivity at the very least? Do you see that, I don't know, maybe the actions of someone like Rand Paul in the Senate might be going to turn things back around, or is this impossible in this current Congress?
Nothing's impossible. Your country was inspired through the wars by a political genius. I mean, Churchill was phenomenal. I mean, he got everybody to stand up and get pointed in the right direction, and everybody was pulling on the rope in the same direction, and it's fantastic to see. I think Reagan did a great job. Can Trump do that, or some politician that's hiding in the wings? Sure, they could. I just think it's probably not in the cards, and we're going to have something happen with the economy or the dollar that's severe enough that we start to change the way that the economy or the government is run or spending is taking place. If we can do that, we can come back. I think America's a great country, and we have the right attitude for it. We just need the right spark to get us going in that direction.
Okay, a slight note of positivity to end on there. Kevin DeMeritt, thanks so much for being with us. Thanks for your time and indeed your economic expertise as well. Really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us here on GB News.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And of course, if you want to listen to more content like this, more conversations, more podcasts, do remember to click that subscribe button and follow us here on GB News Originals.